The explosion didn't sound like thunder. Thunder rolls and fades. This was sharp, final, like the world snapping shut. One moment Captain Aisha Rahman was running, boots pounding against the dirt road, shouting orders over the roar of gunfire. The next, the ground rose up and swallowed her whole. She never saw the second device. She only remembered the flash, the heat, and the terrible weightlessness, as if the air itself had let go of her. When she woke, the sky was gone. At first, there was no pain. Just a strange quiet, broken only by distant shouting and the high, thin ringing inside her head. She tried to sit up and realized she couldn't feel her legs. Not numb, nothing, as if they no longer belonged to her. She lifted her head, saw smoke drifting across the road, saw her platoon scrambling for cover, and then she saw the blood. Someone screamed her name. Someone else was crying. Aisha forced herself to breathe, to stay conscious. She knew what had happened before anyone said it. She had stepped on the pressure plate meant for the convoy. Meant for all of them. The ambush had been textbook. Narrow road, rocky high ground, nowhere to maneuver. The insurgents had waited for the armored vehicle to roll over the main charge. Aisha had spotted the disturbed dirt at the last second and sprinted forward without thinking, yelling for the driver to stop. She didn't have time to warn them about the secondary device hidden in the ditch. She only had time to move. And she did. The medevac came fast, but time stretches when you're bleeding into the dirt you swore to protect. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she caught fragments of voices, both legs, massive trauma, stay with us, Captain. She wanted to tell them she was fine, that they needed to secure the perimeter, that the men behind her mattered more. But her mouth wouldn't work. Darkness took her before the helicopter blades did. She woke again in a hospital thousands of miles away, surrounded by white walls and the steady beep of machines. Her body felt heavy and wrong. When she looked down, the space beneath the sheet was flat. No legs. The pain came then, crashing over her in waves so violent she screamed until her throat burned. Not just the physical agony, but the sudden, brutal understanding of what her life had become. Running had been her freedom. Marching, training, standing at attention, these were not just duties. They were who she was. Now they were gone. The weeks that followed blurred together. Surgeries, medication, well-meaning visitors with careful eyes and soft voices. Medals presented by officers she barely knew, their words polished and practiced. Extraordinary bravery, selfless action, saved 12 lives. Each time, she nodded, smiled when expected, and waited for them to leave. When the room was empty, she stared at the ceiling and wondered who she was supposed to be now. The men she had saved visited too. One by one, then in small groups. Big soldiers who had faced gunfire without flinching stood awkwardly at the foot of her bed, tears streaming down their faces. They thanked her, voices breaking, hands trembling as they gripped hers. One of them, a young corporal with a baby daughter back home, knelt beside her bed and said, "I'm alive because of you, ma'am." She told them it was her job. She told them she would do it again. And she meant it. But when they left, the silence felt heavier than any explosion. Rehabilitation was harder than the battlefield ever had been. Learning to sit without falling. Learning to balance. Learning to transfer from bed to wheelchair while your muscles scream and your pride shatters. There were days Aisha wanted to quit, days she lay awake at night convinced she had already given everything worth giving. What haunted her most wasn't the loss. It was the feeling of being forgotten. The war moved on. New missions. New heroes. Her name faded from briefings and headlines. She was medically retired with honors, thanked for her service, and sent home with a handshake and a stack of paperwork. Civilian life felt like a foreign country. People stared, then looked away. They praised her courage but didn't know what to say after that. Job interviews were polite and brief. She smiled through them all and went home to a small apartment that felt too quiet. For a long time, she avoided mirrors. The turning point came on an ordinary afternoon. She was struggling with her prosthetics, frustrated and exhausted, when she heard laughter outside. Children playing in the street. Carefree, loud, alive. She rolled closer to the window and watched a little girl riding a bicycle, wobbling, falling, getting back up again and again. Something in Aisha's chest shifted. She hadn't survived to sit in the dark and disappear. She hadn't given her legs so the rest of her life could be defined by what she'd lost. The next day, she signed up to volunteer. At first, it was small things. Speaking at a local school. Helping other wounded veterans navigate paperwork and prosthetics. Listening. Really listening. She discovered that her scars gave her a voice people trusted. When she spoke about fear, about pain, about rebuilding yourself piece by piece, people leaned in. Years passed. Her strength returned in new ways. She mastered her prosthetics, then her wheelchair, then the art of not apologizing for either. She laughed more. She slept better. She found purpose not in what she could no longer do, but in what she still could. She never returned to a base. Not once. The memories were too sharp, the ache too deep. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. An invitation. A formal ceremony at the very base where it had all happened. A commemoration of the unit's survival and the lives saved that day. The letter was signed by the commanding colonel himself. Aisha stared at it for a long time. Part of her wanted to tear it up. Another part, the part that had always stepped forward instead of back, folded it carefully and placed it on the table. The day of the ceremony, the sun was bright and unforgiving. Rows of soldiers stood at attention on the parade ground, boots aligned, faces forward. Families filled the stands. Flags snapped in the wind. Aisha waited behind the stage, heart pounding harder than it ever had before a mission. She adjusted her jacket, smoothed her hair, and took a breath. She felt exposed without her weapon, without her rank insignia. Just a woman in a chair, years older, carrying memories no one could see. When her name was announced, the crowd murmured. Some recognized it, others didn't. She rolled forward into the open space, the sound of wheels on concrete echoing across the ground. Every eye turned toward her. She kept her gaze steady, her back straight. The colonel stepped down from the podium. He was a tall man with silver in his hair and lines etched deep into his face. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately. When he stopped in front of her, the entire parade ground seemed to hold its breath. Without a word, he came to attention. Then, in full uniform, in front of soldiers, families, and flags, he raised his hand and saluted. It was perfect, crisp, unyielding. The effect was electric. Aisha felt the sting of tears before she realized she was crying. Not from pain, not from grief, but from something close to peace. The colonel held the salute longer than protocol required. When he finally lowered his hand, his voice carried across the ground. Years ago, he said, this officer made a choice that saved the lives of every soldier standing here today. She paid a price most of us will never understand. Her sacrifice did not end on that road. It lives on in every breath taken by those she saved. He turned to the formation. You stand because she stood first. One by one, soldiers raised their hands. 1,000 salutes snapped into place. Aisha had faced explosions, bullets, and loss. But nothing had ever hit her like that moment. She returned the salute as best she could, her hand trembling, her chest tight with emotion. She understood then that she had never been forgotten. Her story hadn't ended in the dust and fire. It had carried forward, written into the lives of others, echoed in their laughter, their children, their futures. As the ceremony ended and people gathered around her, thanking her, hugging her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Whole. She had lost her legs saving them. But she had not lost her worth. She had not lost her purpose. And she had not lost her place among those she served. Some sacrifices change how you walk through the world. Others change how the world remembers you. Hers did both. And when she rolled away from the parade ground that day, the sound of salutes still ringing in her ears, she knew one truth with absolute certainty: courage doesn't end where the body breaks. Sometimes, that's exactly where it begins.